I will be reading John chapter 20, verses 19 through 31. When it was evening on that day, the first day of the week, and the doors of the house where the disciples had met were locked for fear of the Jews, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." After he said this, he showed them his hands and his side. Then the disciples rejoiced when they saw the Lord. Jesus said to them again, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, so I send you." When he had said this, he breathed on them and said to them, "Receive the Holy Spirit. If you forgive the sins of any, they are forgiven them. If you retain the sins of any, they are retained." But Thomas, who was also called the twin, one of the 12, was not with them when Jesus came. So the other disciples told them, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the mark of the nails in his hands, and put my finger in the mark of the nails, and my hand in his side, I will not believe." A week later, his disciples were again in the house, and Thomas was with them. Although the doors were shut, Jesus came in and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here and see my hands. Reach out your hand and put it in my side. Do not doubt, but believe." Thomas answered him, "My Lord and my God." Jesus said to him, "Have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet come to believe." Now Jesus did many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book. But these are written so that you may come to believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that through believing you may have life in his name.
Not using the script today. I doubt I can do that. No, I don't. I know I can do it. But I did write down a question for you all. Have any of you had your own life experience of doubting something until you saw it for yourself? Did any of you have that kind of experience where something happened and you said, "I just am not going to believe it until I see it for myself"? Have you ever been there? And you don't have to share out loud, and maybe you haven't had that experience. Is doubting as part of your faith journey, is that a bad thing? Is that a sign of weakness in your faith? Anybody got any opinions or thoughts on this? And I see people saying, "No, it's not." Why isn't it? Why are we so quick to be critical of Thomas and put that word with doubting with him, which I think a lot of times we're told, there's kind of a negativity around that story. Why is it okay to doubt as part of your faith journey? What is doubting for you? Have you doubted, Kathy?
I think it's because we are human, and in difficult times, we don't feel the presence of God as much, and then you start to doubt your faith.
Mm-hmm.
And those are times when we need it more, but it's hard to do because, like I said, we're human and we have our feelings.
So it's part of being human. It's normal to have doubts, especially when difficult things happen to us. And does God judge us when we have those moments of we're not sure, or we're, God, you're far away, why have you left me? Or does God judge us? Did Jesus judge Thomas in the story? No, he didn't. He could have. Maybe I would have been angry and said, "Thomas, really? Come on. You've been with me for 3 years. You've seen me heal people. You've seen me do this. We've had all these conversations. We've walked and talked together. And you didn't believe that I would do what I said, which was come back, be resurrected, that was not the final word, was my death." Jesus We're so quick, aren't we, to be judgmental or to be critical or angry. Jesus wasn't that way. He said, well, 3 times he told them, peace be with you, the disciples. The last time was when he saw Thomas, peace be with you. But it was like, I'm glad you finally believe, Thomas. Help those who don't believe. Help those who... He didn't get mad at him. He didn't judge him. He embraced him. And I hope that's what, when we can be the hardest on ourselves, that we too can realize that we can be real, we can be human, that is part of life, to ask questions. If Jesus were with us standing here right now, if he had just appeared to us, I asked this at Bethel this morning, and I said, what questions would you have for him? What would you want to ask him? What would you want to know? That, maybe it feels like, I don't believe it on my own, so I'd like to ask Jesus for the answer. What would you want to know? What would you ask him? I'll tell you what the question was at Bethel. We had one, but what would you want to ask Jesus?
I would ask, why is it so hard for us to accept good news?
Why is it so hard for us to accept good news?
We're a pessimistic group.
Okay, good question, Dennis. Why is it so? I wonder what Jesus would say. What do you think Jesus would say to that? Stop being so pessimistic and see the good. Expect good things. Know that I'm with you always. Know that you are never alone, no matter what your deepest, darkest hour feels like. Anybody else? Nancy?
My husband is a concrete guy. He doesn't see it in paper, it's not real.
Okay. So he has to have evidence, and he has to be able to touch it. So maybe a question to Jesus would be, how do we, those of us who know people like that, how do we support them? How do we be with them where they are? Yeah. Good question. That's for those, and especially for those of us who don't need that necessarily. It's harder for us to relate to someone who does. So, is doubt the opposite of faith? Is doubting, when you doubt, when God feels far away, or you doubt God's presence, with, or you wonder, which I hear often, how could a loving God do such a thing? Is that the opposite? To say that, how could such a loving God do such a thing? Take that child's life, or cause that baby to be stillborn, or take my loved one so suddenly. Is that the opposite of faith? Judy, you're saying, I don't think so.
I think it's a learning thing. That most people that go through tragedy like that find their faith stronger afterwards, after they've accepted it and know that it's something beyond.
Right. And I think we maybe gain wisdom, we see more clearly, not in that moment, but later we look back and we say, God, it wasn't God who moved, it was me, and that God embraces those questions, or that time of questioning, or feeling like, we're not sure what we believe anymore. So Brooke, just don't forget that it's okay to ask questions about your faith, and that's not a bad thing. And I see it as being curious. I think the better word for Thomas is curious Thomas, maybe not doubting Thomas. He was curious, and he's the kind of person that likes answers, and don't we all? I mean, I'm going to close with when I do funeral services or celebration of life services, and often I'm asked to do the 23rd Psalm. There's the Psalm starts out very positively and very comforting. The Lord is my shepherd. I have everything I need. He leads me beside still waters and in green pastures. He restores my soul. It starts out very wonderful. But then later on, what does the psalmist pray and say? When I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, the psalmist doesn't say if I walk through the valley, it's when I walk through that valley, you are with me. So we are going to go through hard times, and we're going to feel sometimes like God has wandered off from us, has moved away from us. We're going to feel alone and frightened and scared. And we have that promise that God is always with us. And if we do have questions or doubts, or we're not sure, or we're frightened, or we're scared, or we're angry, or we're crawling because we don't know how else to get through the next 5 minutes, much less the next week, God is with us. And God embraces and welcomes our realness. God doesn't want us to be fake with God. Jesus wasn't fake with God. Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane said, my God, I can't do this. Please don't make me go through this. That was Jesus' humanity. And then when Jesus was on the cross, he said, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you doing this? That's Jesus' humanity and his realness. And those two things, and lots more, but especially those two things, tell me that no matter what I'm feeling, God can embrace it and accept it and is not going to judge me when I'm feeling most weak and most doubtful and most empty. That God says, I get it, Kathy. I get it. My son went through that too. I get it, and I love you. Amen.